Is the draft combine kind of dumb? Yes and no. At least of how it's set up, I do think that it is fairly useless, but there are reasons on why it's useless. And to talk about the combine and why it seems so useless, I do think you have to start at why the combine exists in the first place. And the reason the combine exists in the first place is it's basically a standardized test, right? Back in the day, I think it was like in the 80s, they were scouting these athletes and they were like, hey, we have no idea how fast X player is compared to this player. So what happens if we just have them run a 40 at the combine and we can tell? And then we created all of these drills and that's how the combine got in, right? It's basically a standardized test in the off season. And because it's in the off season, a lot of this stuff is not going to really resemble football, right? And that worked for, I think, a good 20 years, the combine setup, right? And then we started watching it and it became a television product. And now within the last 10 years, it seems like we talk about how pointless the combine is, and how the combine's really only good for elevating the stock of players that we all know aren't going to be that good, right? Like that's usually what the conversation is for the combine. And my thought was, well, how can you make the combine better? My first thought is to fix the drills, right? Because the drills make no sense. Again, it's a standardized test for everybody. And it works if you really care how fast a linebacker is compared to a quarterback. That is really what the 40 is good for, right? Comparative speeds. What it's not really good for, we have found out, is projecting how fast somebody actually plays football, right? We have seen plenty of guys who run sub 4.3 in the 40. Then you put them in pads, they don't run that fast. Or they run a route, they don't run that fast, right? So there is a balance there that you want to get. How important is it to have these cross position comparisons and these universal numbers, right? Like the 40 time, the 3-cone shuttle, the broad jump, all these things are universal for every position. Or would it be more important to have more position specific drills? Like, for example, instead of timing a wide receiver in the 40, how about we time their acceleration in miles per hour as they run a basic route tree? Now, they do some of this in the combine, right? With the quarterback drill where they're running routes, the quarterback's throwing to them. But in those drills, they're worried about catching a ball from a quarterback that they've never caught from before. So that's going to affect how hard they run the route. That's why we really don't use that data. And I don't even know if we even track that data. But you can do that at the combine where you can hook these guys up to a chip that will record accelerometer data, and they can run a basic route tree. And that way you can find out who is coming in and out of their breaks well. Right now, I wouldn't go as far because, again, at the end of the day, this is a off-season activity. You cannot go as far as literally line up a wide receiver with the DB and have that DB be out here trying to, like, that's the Senior Bowl at that point, right? And there's also a balance that you have to work here with how much work can you put in the combine before people just decide to not do it? Because right now the combine is relying on people volunteering to do it. And again, in a day where we had less information, in a day where you can take less from the tape, in a day where you couldn't like figure out miles per hour from game tape, it made sense to go to the combine. But now it really doesn't, right? Like, it doesn't make much sense for a top prospect to do the combine and to do the standardized test because it's not going to change that prospect's draft stock. And I don't know if anything's going to change that. And this is where the combine has to figure out what they want to be, because they've been trying to live in the best of both worlds, right? They have, for a while, they were just exclusively a evaluation tool for teams, right? The tests were for evaluation purposes. The interviews, obviously, for evaluation purposes and all that. But then, as we got more fascinated with 40 times, this thing became a television spectacle. And now, not only is it a television spectacle, we're selling tickets, which I would never buy a ticket to the combine. And I am somebody who like kind of scouts on this stuff. But you can buy a ticket to the combine. Like, that is something that people probably who are watching this video, some people who have watched this video have probably done or are doing right now. So that begs the question. Is the combine now more evaluation tool to entertainment product, or more entertainment product to evaluation pool? Because if it's more of an evaluation, things need to change. If it's more of entertainment, things need to change. They're in the middle right now, and they don't know where they want to be. Honestly, I don't think they need to make everything an entertainment spectacle. Like, I think they went a little too far with the combine, like selling tickets to it and everything. But it seems like that's the direction they're going to go with. It's just try to squeeze every dollar out of this thing that they can. And if that's the way they're going to go, then they need to consider dropping some money to get some of these prospects to come in, right? Because now if it's a television product and I'm going to be the star of the show, well, I'm going to want to get paid for that product. That's basic economics, right? Like, if you want CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and all these top stars and like Lamar Jackson or guys who haven't done it that you would really love to see their 40 time, well, you're going to have to pay for that. Are they going to be willing to pay for that, right? So are you going to be willing to take the steps to make this a more entertaining television product, right? Change up some of the drills to something more visually pleasing, or and just tell GMs that, hey, pro days are pro days still, and you're really just taking this time to talk to the athletes. That's really the evaluation here, which is what it's been leaning towards more and more every day. But if you're going to do that, I think there are more interesting ways of making this a television product, and honestly, ways that you could get better out of it. Either way, I just don't think the combine works as it is. I think it is something that needs to evolve into one thing or another. Now, it doesn't need to become the Pro Bowl where they're playing flag football and throwing dodgeballs at each other, even though that would be more entertaining than most of the combine drills. But you know, the combine does appeal to a certain demographic of people, right? It's not going to be the Pro Bowl where everybody's going to watch it, right? It's going to be something where it's going to appeal to the most hardcore fans. Like, even if you make it a big spectacle, even if you make it a television product, it will get like 10 million people, but that's just because there's 10 million people willing to be crazy about football. I'm one of those people. So if you want to make a product that appeals to the people who would be inclined to watch a combine, then I do think you still have to make those changes. If you want to make a combine that is more useful for talent evaluators, I still think those changes are pretty similar that you would have to make. Now, what changes would I recommend? I think that things should resemble more football than what they are. Now, there's a fine line, right? Do you get them to show up in pads? Now, the only reason I ask this because it sounds ridiculous offset, because why would you wear pads if you're not going to be playing? But basketball players, for instance, do the combine in what they will be playing in. And it's a lot easier for basketball players because they play in regular gym equipment, right? But they measure in shoes, right? They take weight in shoes because it really don't matter how much you weigh without them because you ain't never gonna be butt naked on the basketball court. And that's the question I ask. Do we weigh and measure these football players out their pads? Because does it matter? Now, again, that could lead to some funky stuff like somebody's, but you could tell if Bryce Young show up weighing 230 pounds, you could tell he figured out some funky stuff. And these pads are so tight nowadays that you can't really add much in there. And those will be the same pads that they have to do the drilling. So if they want to appear heavier, they're going to have to play heavier and run heavier. So they wouldn't even be inclined to do that. But should the combine be in full pads? It seems ridiculous because, again, you wouldn't wear full pads unless somebody trying to hit you. And in no iteration of the combine are these guys getting hit. But it would be more appealing, like, if they did have pads on, because it would feel like, okay, this is a better measurement. You're going to have to keep the 40 time in no matter what, because the 40 does have some purposes. I think it's misused the purposes, but it does have purpose, but maybe more specific drills for specific positions. So wide receivers, right? I want to see them run the route tree, and I want to know how fast they're running route trees compared to other wide receivers and other tight ends and other people who have to run routes. I want to know this, right? I want to see running backs run the route tree. I want to see fullbacks run the route